Hi everyone, welcome to the Ecological Continuity Trust webinar. I just want to remind you to keep your microphones muted and your camera off just to help with background noise and bandwidth. If you want to ask questions as we're going through the seminar, just pop them in the chat and Ben will pick them up at the end. There'll be plenty of time for asking questions. I'm very pleased to welcome Jason Reeves, who's the Head of Policy and Communications at CIEEM, the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Let's see if I can share my screen quickly. So yes, thank you very much for having me. Really nice to be talking to the ECT today. So my name is Jason Reeves. I'm Head of Policy and Comms at CIEEM. I've been around a long time, over 15 years with the Institute, but it has grown and changed a lot in that time. So yeah, today I'm going to talk a bit about the aims and activities and what we do at the Institute. So just a bit of background, a bit of history. So we were founded in 1991 as IEEM, the Institute, rather than Chartered. So this year is our 30th anniversary. So August, September time, which is sort of when the anniversary is, we've got some activities planned. And there's the original logo there for you to see before it changed. And then moving on, 2004, we became a constituent member of the Society for the Environment. That meant we could award Chartered Environmentalist. 2013, we got our own Royal Charter, which meant we could award Chartered Ecologist as well. And then just last year, we became a registered charity as well, which has sort of been something that we've been looking into doing for quite some time. That happened quite quickly, actually, unexpectedly last year, which opens up new opportunities for us in terms of engagement and funding and that kind of thing. So what do we do? So we're the professional membership body for ecologists and environmental managers. Our remit covers the UK, all 4 countries, and the Republic of Ireland. So there isn't an equivalent body in the Republic. We do have some members internationally outside of the UK and Ireland. They tend to have some kind of connection to the UK or Commonwealth countries, and there aren't too many of them, but they are there. Our mission is to raise the standards and profile of professional ecological and environmental management for the benefits of nature and society. And if we get that right, hopefully our vision comes true, and that's a healthy natural environment for current and future generations. Our Royal Charter objectives are in a similar vein, so working for the public good, for a fully functioning biosphere, and doing that through raising standards of professional ecology. So a bit more focused, we have a strategic plan that we've just agreed at the beginning of this year for 2021 to 2024. There's 5 goals in there which are interlinked and interconnected. So they are raising standards, as you'd expect for us, that's writing guidance, maintaining the standards that our members work to. Championing change, so there's quite a few things that have come to the fore in the last 2 years probably, around diversity in the sector, for example, that isn't very good, and I'll come on to that later. But also things like entry into the profession that has been quite closed, there's been some barriers, so we're looking at changing things there as well. So positive changes, I suppose, is the focus there. Challenge and influence is around our policy and advocacy work. There are lots of things up in the air at the moment, so being active and engaged there. Achieving Action 2030, I'll come on to this in a bit more detail later, but that's our climate change pledge effectively. We have declared that we will be carbon net zero by 2030, so it's how we get there, and that's a project there. And then strengthening and improving is around making sure we have a resilient organisation to deliver everything else, where we have good governance, good finances, for example. So a bit about our members. So at the moment we're approaching about 6,500 members. I can find that laser pointer quickly. So we're on an upward trajectory. Membership is still growing. We had a little bit of a blip, sort of exponential growth was starting to, up until about the 2009 financial crisis, and then took a little bit of a dip and then it carried on. So there was a delay there, but that did affect us a little bit, but we continue to grow. So very happy with that. As I said before, our members are mostly based in the UK and the Republic of Ireland, but there are a few internationally. And in terms of where those members work, so the majority do work in consultancy, but that ranges everything from the big multinationals right down to the individual sole traders and everything in between. I'd say most of those consultancies that have members of ours are probably the SME scale. Then we have members in local government, so local authority ecologists, in central government, for example, in DEFRA, and then the agencies, Natural England, Nature Scot, and NRW, Natural Resources Wales. A few members in the NGOs, a few members in academia, so those engaged in research and teaching, and then industry, which is those members involved in things like the energy and water utility sector and roads and rail sector, where they have land management responsibility, so there's an element of biodiversity and ecology involved in that. So just a bit about governance and volunteers. Apologies for this flowchart. It's a bit messy, but everything is there. I think the takeaways from this really are that we're governed by a governing board, so that's our decision-making body. That's made up of elected members, chaired by our president, and they delegate a few responsibilities to some subcommittees, and they have two advisory groups. So one is the Fellows Forum. So anyone who's a fellow, of the Institute can join that and give their advice into the governing board. And then the other group is the Advisory Forum, which is an elected group of members who can also feed in and through the membership. And then in the middle of the chart, Secretariat. So we're the only paid members of staff on this page. Everyone else is volunteer. So we literally wouldn't be able to do what we do without volunteers at all. And then there's all the committees that are on sort of delivery end. So green is governance, decision making, and then blue is then the logistics and delivery. So just moving on to staff. So we have a chief exec, the executive, Sally Haynes, some of you may know, and then have 4 teams. So membership and marketing, they have 7 in their team at the moment. Finance, office, and volunteer engagement, there's 4 in that team. My team, policy and comms, so there's 6 of us in the team. We have 1 intern at the moment, and then we also have a freelance editor for our magazine who's effectively a member of the team, but technically isn't. And then professional practice, so there's 5 permanent members of that team, and they also have an intern at the moment. I'll go through most of the individual roles of each of those teams as I go through our activities. So professional practice mostly revolves around guidance and standards. Our guidance is split primarily into technical guidance and professional guidance. So technical guidance is publicly available. Some of the sort of landmark ones that we've worked on recently have been ecological impact assessment, which has been updated several times, and there's some add-on work going on for that at the moment. And biodiversity again is probably the other big one more recently, where we and 2 other organisations helped to develop the principles and guidance, and then put together some case studies on that, and that as well has got some more work going on that as well. And then professional guidance series, so that's member-only guidance, but is more around the transferable skills, the sort of day-to-day doing your job, so things like contracts, access to land, fee rates, the sort of behind-the-scenes admin kind of work, where we support members in that way instead. And then standards. So there's a bit of a carrot and stick approach here. So the stick is the complaints and disciplinaries processes. So we have a code of professional conduct that every member has to sign up to when they join. And sometimes members fall short of the mark. So they may find themselves in a disciplinary process as a result of a complaint. That can be anything from, well, it can be dismissed if there's no evidence, to some kind of reprimand and a requirement for training or some kind of oversight. We have actually expelled members, though, through that process as well. And then the much nicer side of that is the carrot, where we have an awards ceremony in process every year. So we started that in 2006 with one award, which we gave to David Attenborough. We've since given it to other people prominent in the sector. But every year we've built on that and added more as a real celebration of what's been done at the highest standards, best practice and good practice in the sector for individuals and organisations, which prior to the pandemic was a really nice event we held every year in person, at lunch. The last in person one we had David Lindo, the urban birder, as our guest speaker. This last year we had to do it virtually. We're hoping we can get back to an in-person event, but we will have to see how that goes, and several other things, I suppose, in terms of COVID and the spread. So professional development. So our professional development team works on our conferences. So they organise 2 to 3 centrally organised conferences every year. So we hold a spring and an autumn conference every year, and then some years we do a summer one as well. And then we also do country-specific conferences in Scotland, Wales, and Ireland every year. Excuse me. Training workshops. Pre-COVID, in a normal year, we would hold anywhere between 150 and 200 training workshops, part of raising standards in the profession, and that would involve anywhere around 1,000 plus people on those. We've tried to move as many of those as we can online. Obviously, some of them just don't work like that. They need to be field-based, but we're starting to get some of those back now. And then obviously the thing that has had a big uptick in the last year has been webinars. So we've done a lot more of those. If there's a training element to them, they're generally paid for. If there are an information or an update or a panel discussion, that they're generally free. So for example, the graphic you've got there is for our next Sector Streams webinar. That's next week on invasive species and biosecurity. That's a series we started during the pandemic on topical issues and are going to continue now. So that's July's episode. We're working on August's on environmental net gain, if that's of interest to anyone. But that's free to join. So if you want to visit the website, that's there to book up. We also have a mentoring platform where we get members to upload their information around their expertise and experience areas for mentors. And then mentees can select what they're interested in and what they want to learn, and then we pair them together. We've had very good feedback on that as a development opportunity certainly for early career ecologists. We've also helped to develop apprenticeships, so level 6 and 7 apprenticeships in ecology, recognising that there are different routes into the career and it's not just degrees, as was mostly the case previously. We do, however, still accredit degrees. So if they meet our criteria of content, and then particularly the ratio of fast to field-based activity, we accredit undergraduate and master's degrees. And then we put quite a lot into student and early career support as well. So we have a dedicated area of the website for them. We have an internal student and careers working group, and then we have a members group, a student focus group that we can bounce ideas off as well. We do quite a lot of careers events as well through our member networks. So the member networks, so all run by volunteers. They're broken down into geographic sections, which are location-based, and then special interest groups, which are topic-based. So the geographic sections, there's one each for Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. It's an all-Ireland group because most of the members over there work across the border. And then England's broken down into 8 regional sections. The members in those groups, so each of them have a committee. They can organise site visits, activities, talks, trying to engage members at the regional level, the local level. And then our special interest groups, so we have 5 set up at the moment: marine and coastal, academia, ecological restoration and habitat creation, UK overseas territories, and then Rainbow Places, which is a joint one with the Landscape Institute and a few other professional bodies. And then 2 in the pipeline for special interest groups, early career and freelancers. Something that's just become more and more prevalent for us is that those 2 groups in particular need more support, and support from each other as well as from us. So they're in the pipeline for development. Communications and publications. So our main conduit to the external world is our website. So there's an ongoing update for news items on the homepage there, and then also blogs. So we try to publish a new blog every month or so, sometimes more than that. The last one on there was around climate change. We've got some more coming up around swift conservation and invasive species. We're also on social media. So we're on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We've just this month actually started to separate our streams of social media as well. So one is around news, and then we've set up separate channels for jobs so that people can choose between which one they want and which one is their preference, or if they choose both. But we found we were advertising quite a lot of jobs in the main social media channels, and that was kind of not fogging things up, but perhaps a little bit of a distraction if you were only interested in the news. And then newsletters. So the two main ones that we send out are a weekly e-news, which is public. So anyone can sign up to that. If you go onto the homepage of the website, you can subscribe to that. You get a weekly update on a Tuesday. And then we do a monthly e-briefing, which is a sector news roundup. That's a member-only benefit though. And then our In Practice magazine. So there's two cover examples there, the graphics. So that's quarterly, very well thought after by our members, very oversubscribed in terms of submissions. And our editorial board has a tough job picking out what to include every quarter. But that includes technical articles, opinion pieces, sector and institute news, interviews. There's a diary in there as well. But a general overview and update every quarter for the members. And that's hard copy and digital. So there are some members who choose just to receive that digitally. Policy and advocacy. So we have a strategic policy panel that oversees our main policy and advocacy work. That involves things like our engagement in Westminster with MPs, ministers, and other groups. And then in each country, we have a dedicated policy group as well. So for England, Wales, Scotland, and all Ireland. And they deal mostly with in-country activity and work quite closely with our vice presidents for engagement in the country. And also respond to things like consultations, which tend to be nationally focused rather than UK, although there are the odd things. Action 2030, so I spoke about this earlier. So this is our project group for getting us to net zero carbon by 2030. We have a very active group there engaged. We have our own carbon management plan for the Institute. We're working on scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. We declared a climate emergency and ecological crisis in 2019, so we're building on that. They're now working on habitat sequestration and how different habitats sequester carbon, and also sustainable resource use. So it came as a little bit of a surprise to me, actually, that we use an awful lot of plastic in the ecology sector, so they're working on alternatives to that. And we also drive quite a lot as a sector. So working on some specific things there. They have an action plan every year that they'll be working to 2030. And then some specific task groups that are working at the moment. So one's on environmental net gain. So that's building on the work that we did on biodiversity net gain. So we've published a briefing paper on effectively what it is. We've also published a principles document on delivery, quite high level. And we're now working on some next steps and how it can be integrated into other things. And as I said, the webinar in August will probably be on that, our sector streams webinar, if you're interested. And then biodiversity offsetting is another one that is a sort of continuation of other work, but is still there. So we're still working on that in the background. We also run the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Nature in Westminster. So that's, we effectively provide the secretariat for it. It's a group of cross-party MPs and peers who are interested in nature. Barry Gardner chairs that group for us, and they have a series of events every year. We're desperately trying to get them back out in the field to see interesting things, but we've been doing things in Parliament with them for the past year or so, virtually. And then we also work in partnership, trying not to reinvent the wheel where we don't have to on policy and influencing. And there's two main groups that we work with there as umbrella groups. So the Environmental Policy Forum is a group of professional bodies and learning societies, so we work with them. And then the other one is the Environmental Link groups. So there's the four: Wildlife and Countryside Link, Scottish Environment Link, Welsh Environment Link, and Northern Ireland Environment Link. And that's our sort of mechanism for engaging with the NGOs for the most part. Membership. So our membership team manages the competency framework. This is how we assess membership. So it's based around themes. So there's 6 technical and 8 transferable, and then there's sub-themes within each of those. If you were applying for membership or chartership, you'd have to go through this process, pick out the ones you wanted to assess. They would be assessed then on the basis of being basic, capable, accomplished, or authoritative. And that would then follow through to the grade of membership that you were eligible for. So our membership now grades are student, qualifying, associate, full, and fellow. We recognise associate, full, and fellow as our professional grade, so they get post-nominals. Students, you literally just have to be a student. We have tried to open that up as much as possible, recognising that there are multiple routes into the profession now, and it's not just ecology, biology students. People come in from geography or things entirely different and effectively change career after graduating. And then qualifying is a newer grade for us. It used to be graduate, but recognising that not everyone comes to the profession as a graduate. That's a much better fit, recognising that there are different routes into the profession for us. And then our membership team also oversees chartership. And as I mentioned earlier, we have chartered ecologist and chartered environmentalist as options for those who want to become chartered. Diversity and wellbeing has become a much more important element of our work over the last couple of years as well. So on diversity and inclusion, we recognise we're starting from a very low point. With the exception of gender, we have a good gender balance in the ecology sector and in the institute, but on pretty much everything else, it's not great. We'll be honest. We knew that, I think, before we started the process. We've since done a survey of our membership and done a bit more work to try and find out where we are, but the sector is effectively white, middle class, and not very diverse at all. So we've started using the Science Council's Diversity and Inclusion Progression Framework as a mechanism to work out where we are, which is pretty much at the bottom of their scale. But it gives us something to work on for the long term as well. So we have a working group, an internal staff working group that we've now opened up to members as well. So we're getting good feedback on that, and we have a year 1 action plan that we'll then build on every year. So that's a long-term process for us that we will keep building on. A little bit about COVID. When everything kicked off at the beginning of last year, we set up a dedicated area of the website for COVID support. We published guidance on continuing to do ecological survey under the restrictions. So we did that for the UK and for Ireland. And we updated those a couple of times. And then we also provided an advice note on the sort of health and safety side of things for doing site work as well. On those web pages, we continue to provide updates. And we've also got some well-being elements in there as well for working from home, staying safe, that kind of thing. And then more generally on well-being, even before the pandemic, we started, a healthy profession as an area of our website where there's web resources, which has some information and signposting to other sources of information. So something we've become much more aware of and something that we try to support our members more on. And then we've also introduced something called a member assistance program, which is a support subscription effectively that we pay for our members, where members can phone up anonymously and get support and guidance on things like debt, legal advice, depression. They can even get some free counselling sessions through that. So just another way that we're supporting our members outside of the sort of technical ecology, but sort of holistic well-being approach to things. So just a bit on future activities. Obviously, we'll follow our strategic plan goals, but But then a few other things just to point out as particular things. So a major thing we'd like to look at over the next few years is raising the status of the profession, and this comes up in a number of ways. So one is often in a multidisciplinary team, the sort of ecologist is seen as the sort of lower end, often the sort of poorest paid member of the team. So looking at how we can raise the status there and the standing of the profession. Sort of linked to that, more support for early career and freelancers. We recognise that there is an issue with getting into the sector, the sort of treatment of early career professionals, the sort of hours, rates of pay. So we're starting to look at those issues. Diversity and inclusion, I've mentioned, we're starting from a very low base. There's plenty for us to do. Action 2030, obviously, we will continue to work towards our net zero goal. And then just some current projects. So earned recognition, we're working with Natural England, with bat ecologists, so that we can streamline the process, hopefully a little bit with bat licensing. So meeting a certain threshold, an ecologist could be an earned recognition practitioner, meaning that they wouldn't have to apply for a license for every project they did involving bats. They effectively themselves would be licensed. We've also started some new work on farm advice, linking to new agri-environment schemes. So we're developing a toolkit and potentially some accreditation for farm advisors. And then we're working on accreditation for ecological clerk of works for those ecologists who work on construction sites, and then potentially also accreditation for ecological impact assessment. So for those members working in the EIA, environmental impact assessment area. And then obviously we'll continue the work on environmental net gain. There's something new that's coming out, building on biodiversity net gain. There should be more coming out on that from Natural England shortly, but wider interest as well. And then more broadly as well, engaging with a changing policy environment. There's lots of things up in the air, particularly in England at the moment. There's Brexit divergence, having left the EU. There isn't that EU framework holding nature conservation legislation together effectively anymore. And we're starting to see more and more things go off in different directions. So it's working out how we can support members who more often than not, work across borders, and also where we can support government in a way, I suppose, as well, in where that happens, because there are some things where, for example, with international reporting, the UK still needs to report as a single entity. There's lots of change in planning. In England, there's planning reform been proposed, which would be a major change, but there's also changes going on in Scotland and Wales. Protected species licensing, mostly in England. There's lots of change there and in the pipeline. So working on that. Agri-environment, as I mentioned already, is changing. And then we're also engaged with the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. So that's linked to the United Nations Biodiversity COP15 event later this year, where there'll be a new global biodiversity target set. Yeah, amongst other things. And yeah, thank you very much. And any questions?